give you a little bit of backstory, I bought this car back in last August. I bought it from a coworker who had a mild engine fire. A fuel hose had burst on it, and he was going to junk the car. He offered it to me, and I picked up the car for $2,000. You know, what could I say? But so far, we found out that this car actually had a bent rod, so it needed essentially an entire motor. So this thing's been on the back burner for a couple months now. It's just too cold to work in my garage. So we've actually got this project rolling again. I'm going to show you what this looks like right now. Okay, you ready for this? It's a bit much. Here we are. I took these headlights out. I just have them propped up there. I took the brackets that hold the headlights in place and everything. And essentially this motor is going to be coming out. We're going to rebuild this engine. So we're not buying a replacement motor, but essentially it's getting a replacement block. Now the block is actually here. Excuse my garage, it's so dirty. But we've got a replacement block for this bad boy. This is the front view of it. This cylinder is actually the one that's damaged, cylinder number 5. You can see the little bit of reflection. It's a little dirty, but these cylinder walls aren't scored up or anything. And this thing suffered a bent rod. I believe it was from a bad fuel injector. That's common on these M156s to go out. And when it goes out in a big way. They stay stuck open. It floods the cylinder with straight gasoline, which is almost the same as hydrolocking a car. But so far we've been getting to work on this thing. Now this car did have some mild fire damage. You can see that hose over there I replaced before, and this thing was actually all together and we got it to start. This wiring harness is new. This thing's a full Frankenstein. It's got a bunch of different parts from different M156 motors on it. These covers here are from a different car. The valve covers are from a different car. Now, essentially, the only work I've been doing now to get this thing out, which the only convenient thing about having it on an S is how open all this is. Here are Cleveland Shorty headers. There's the transmission, the bell housing. Now, the thing is, this motor is capable of coming straight up and out. Instead, if this was a C63, we'd have to get over this cowl a little bit. But just taking things slowly, taking my time with it. I've never pulled an engine out, but I took the alternator off. The ABC pump, I took it off. I have it on a bench over there. It was disgusting. And I'm gonna undo the AC compressor because I really don't want to empty this line for the fluid for the air conditioning. So I'm gonna leave that as is, and I'm gonna see about disconnecting these bell housing bolts and possibly maybe even taking the transmission off and dropping it. So making this engine come out straight up. I've got an engine crane now that I'm borrowing. So this thing is going to be getting underway pretty soon. Like I showed you before, the new block is here. What's interesting is these things have what's called an Alusil coating. It's all aluminum block, and it's actually like a slick coating that's on the inside. These got some dust here, but this thing's been sitting for about 2 weeks since I got it. I just cleaned up the deck a little bit. No, I didn't wire wheel it. I was just using some gasket remover for all these water jackets over here where normally the head gasket goes, and there's like light little silicone around the water jackets, guide pins for these cylinder heads. So this thing, we're gonna work on getting this thing up and running and seeing what it can do with it. Maybe before we do some kind of crazy project, I always thought about putting a single turbo on one of these things. Everybody supercharges them, but the superchargers are over $10,000. And I bought this car for $2,000. It really doesn't warrant having a supercharger on it, especially when they cost so much. So this thing's gonna start getting underway. The body overall is actually in pretty decent shape. This car, when I had first got it, had a chrome wrap on it, and this wrap was pretty tired. And excuse my garage, it's so dirty, but a lot of stuff is going on. But so far, this motor is gonna come out. It's gonna go on to the engine stand, and then this is gonna get completely stripped. Head's coming off, valve covers, everything's gonna get organized. The camshafts on this motor are actually in good place. What sucks is I actually put new head bolts on this car before I started it. So I did the one at a time method where you would use the timing tools, remove the camshafts, and then pull the bolts out in the reverse torque sequence, and then just throw the new bolts back in as you pull them out one by one. That's an easier way to do it. So you'd save the head gasket and you don't have to have the labor of pulling the head off. It's not so hard on the S. The S has actually got some ample space. Once these valve covers are off, the cams are out, and once all this is apart and those bolts are out all the way, it's actually pretty easy to get this head off. this is a C63, it'd be real tight. E63, a little bit more space, but that's the benefit of having the S. We've got a little bit more room on here. But the S63 project is coming along. $2,000 car. A lot more work than it warrants. But this is just, a project for some fun. There's nothing really wrong with my other car, the S65. So until I do something crazy with that, this is going to take up space in the garage. We're going to see what else we can do about this thing. It's actually got a Kleeman tune on it for these Kleeman headers. We're going to get these things cleaned up because they are in, worse for wear shape, to say the least. The funny thing is, when I got this car, this valve cover, these aren't the original valve covers, but the valve cover bolts all along the bottom here were missing, and I actually found them like tucked up in the corner here. And as I was under the car putting wires together and doing whatnot, I actually found there was all oil on the downside of the block, and I'm like, somebody really didn't care about this car. But we're going to show a little bit of love and see what we can do with it. The engine is going to be out in a little bit. We've got the engine hoist. I just need to do a little bit more work. The exhaust manifold is unbolted on this side. It's got to be unbolted on here. The two motor mount bolts from underneath, so we can pull this thing out with the motor mounts. This hose has to be undone. We're going to unbolt the air conditioner compressor and leave that in place, because essentially we're going to be able to take this engine and lift it vertically out. And there's there's some oil cooler lines here, and there's a line, I believe it's that one right there, it goes under the crank pulley, that's going to get unbolted. And pretty much those are the only vanes holding this thing in place. That and the transmission. The transmission's either going to come out, or we're going to undo the belt housing bolts and the torque converter bolts. If we do it that way, leaving the transmission in place, we'd have to like pop this forward to get it off the converter and then up. And the only thing is I'm worried about is puncturing the radiator. But, we've got a ton of space right here. We've got like at least 8 inches. But lifting the car up on blocks, taking the transmission out, we'd be able just to lift it vertically, no drama. So that's probably the easier way to do it. But this thing is going to get a full rebuild. Like I said, this one, cylinder 5, is the one that hydrolocked. We had this thing running, the original motor, we had this thing running, and this thing was shaking so bad. We're like, what's going on? What's going on? We just get a camera in there, and we actually see there's a hole in the cylinder. And it was the way the pistons were moving, it was actually making a vacuum. And there's still it's been here for months, so these valve seats are pretty in good shape. See all this oil and stuff in the PCV valve. See about getting a catch can on this thing. These things recirculate a lot of gas vapor through the PCV valve, and that's what causes all this grime and stuff in the intake. The clean spots are where the gasoline sprays it, because this is a port injection, good old-fashioned port injection. Now this direct injected stuff, my S65 is port injection, and there's no worries with there. The injectors aren't $1,000. But S63 project is coming underway. Look out for it soon. We're not going to be hurting anybody's feelings with this car. We're just going to beat it up a little bit, maybe change the look. All right, thank you.